All right, YouTube. This is Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit. Uh, I've been telling my subscribers that I was gonna keep doing updates on the old Block 6 in Chicago, and this is another variant I want people to look at because what they're trying to do in the media is they really trying to dehumanize these young brothers and not really tell a story. They're creating a whole narrative. But what I'm going to show you today, if you pay attention, I'm going to show you why the government, from the feds to the local police, hate Lil Durk and King Von. I'm going to show you why they ops in Chicago hate them. And mostly it's a different variant that people don't pay attention to. It's the sins of the fathers. They didn't like their fathers, and their fathers was powerful men in Chicago. And it's a difference from somebody who's raised and have a direct lineage connection with their fathers than just with their mothers. That's why you see Mama Duck acting the way she's acting out there, but you don't see Von and Mama, or you don't see uh, Dirk's mama, even though she lost D-Thing, you don't see them out there like that. So this video is really going to be about the sins of the father, and I want you to look into the connection and the relationship they had with their fathers. We're going to start with Dirk. This for fair usage commentary under the Copyright Act 1976 for educational purposes. Check out this. This is Dirk father.
The decade. But only real fans know that before Lil Durk was running the rap game, his father Big Durk was running the streets of Chicago. Here's a closer look at the story of Big Durk, Lil Durk's legendary father. Lil Durk grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood in the south side of Chicago. His father, Dante Banks, aka Big Durk, was sentenced to life in prison when the rapper was only 7 months old for running a major crack empire. Eventually, Big Durk would get a second chance at life and be released in time to reunite with his superstar son. But not before spending more than 25 years in a federal prison. Big Durk also grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood of Chicago. He was one of 10 children, including 7 boys and 3 girls, and growing up, his mother was addicted to drugs. They moved around a lot and never found a stable place to live for too long. His grandmother lived in Inglewood, and that's where he was first exposed to the street life. In an interview with Cred Talks TV, Big Durk said that growing up in Inglewood was both hard and exciting at the same time.
But overall, you know, coming up in Inglewood was coming up in Inglewood was hard and exciting at the same time.
He saw the hustlers, gamblers, prostitutes, and everyone else doing what they had to do to survive, and young Dante would become fascinated with that lifestyle. He said that he used to watch Gamblers like it was a TV show because he knew if he sat there long enough, someone would get shot, stabbed, or beat up.
Because I knew if I sit there and watch them long enough, it was just like TV. Someone in the end gonna get shot, someone gonna get stabbed, someone gonna get whooped because in the end, someone is gonna be cheap.
His older brothers would fall victim to that lifestyle before he did and would end up getting locked up, leaving Big Dirk to be the man of the house when he was only about 12 years old. He said that the moment he turned from Dante Banks into Big Dirk was when one day he came home from school and all of his family stuff had been moved out onto the lawn. He saw his mother crying and begging the neighbors for a place to stay, and that's when he decided that he had to learn how to make his own money and become successful. But growing up in a wild neighborhood like Inglewood, there weren't many ways to make money, especially when you're still just a kid. So he got involved in the drug game to support himself. He had a cousin who was a plug, so he went to her and asked for some work so he could start hustling. He was only about 13 or 14 at the time, but she still started him off with an 8 ball of coke. As he stood on the corner in the freezing cold, trying to sell that 8 ball, he says that was the moment he transformed from Dante Banks into Big Dirk. He attended Paul Robeson High School on 69th and Normal, but he only went to please his grandmother and just barely graduated. But high school was also where he started getting exposed to gang culture. He said that the school was mostly BD, but his neighborhood was primarily GDs. Plus, there were some black P Stones and Vice Lords on the outskirts. He ended up joining the GDs because they were the people he hung around the most. He was already in the streets hustling and had built a crew that was respected in the neighborhood. But after linking up with the GDs, Big Dirk was able to bring his operation to a whole new level. He had so much influence in his neighborhood that he was selected to be the main shot caller for the area. This meant that he got to meet with the founder of the gang, Larry Hoover. The Gangster Disciples were founded in the south side of Chicago in 1965 by Larry Hoover and David Barksdale. Hoover had a gang called the Supreme Gangsters, and Barksdale was one of the founders of the Black Disciples. They united in 1969 to form the Black Gangster Disciple Nation, but eventually broke off from each other and formed 2 separate gangs. the gangster disciples, and the black disciples, who are now.
This is why you used to hear sometimes King Von would say on King David, he would merchant on King David, which is David Barksdale. Now, what I'm showing you is that these young brothers, Durk and Von, they was born into this lifestyle. It was really born out of the poverty and the lack of control in Chicago, the undermining of Chicago's organizations. So when you see them now, they're on trial. I mean, there's a lot of jealousy and envy and revenge directed at them. That's why I asked, can they get a fair trial in Chicago? You know what I mean? Because everybody has a old axe to grind with them from that's been passed down even from their daddies. I'm gonna let you listen to a little bit more about Big Durk.
Now bitter enemies. Larry Hoover maintained control of the gangster disciples, who now operates across 10 cities in 31 states, primarily in the South and Midwest. In 1997, Hoover would be sentenced to 150 to 200 years in prison for the 1973 murder of a 19-year-old drug dealer named William Pookie Young, also for his role as leader of the gangster disciples.
The 44-year-old acknowledged leader of the Black Gangster Disciples has been in prison since 1973 for a drug-related murder.
He's currently serving 6 life sentences at the ADX Florence prison, a maximum security prison that also houses inmates like El Chapo and the Unabomber.
Now I want you to think about this. Hoover been in jail since 1973. He's an old man. They won't let this old man out. They don't let everybody else out. And everybody else been pardoned, but they will not let him out.
But even while behind bars, Larry Hoover continued to run the massive gang empire he built before his incarceration. So Big Durk was taking direction from the very top of the food chain. The two would meet to discuss business and ended up forming a solid relationship. This relationship would allow Durk to take his drug operations to a new level and brought a lot more structure and manpower to his organization. But the increase in volume also came with more risk, and Big Durk had a few close calls even before he was locked up. He described one incident where there was a drought or a shortage of product, so he had to pick up from a source that he knew was a bit sketchy. Police ended up catching on to him, but he was driving a souped-up 64 Malibu and was able to lose him by speeding off. He says that he was driving so fast down a one-way street that if anyone stepped outside or opened the door, he would have been finished. He also had a sister with him at the time, and after the police chase, he felt bad about risking her life along with his own. Big Durk also claims that the war between the BDs and GDs actually started in his neighborhood. He says that it all started over a dispute over territory. He grew up with one of the leaders of the BDs, Jerome Shorty Freeman, so they had been cool with each other, even though they were part of different gangs. But eventually, it came time to divide up the neighborhood because of their affiliations, and the Freemans felt they were entitled to more territory than Big Durk and the GDs. They wouldn't negotiate when Big Durk and his people pushed back, and this is what sparked the deadly war that continues to this day. But despite all the violence and close calls with the police, Big Durk says that he never thought the money would ever stop because he was running an airtight operation. He said that he was on the street 24/7, but the cops were only out there 8 hours a day. So there was no way they would ever catch up to him because he was always a step ahead. He thought that maybe he'd eventually retire from the game, but never thought he'd actually get caught. Despite his careful planning and hustler mentality, the police would eventually catch up with him. Big Durk would be arrested for distribution of cocaine and sentenced to life in prison in 1994. He was accused of being the primary organizer of a crack cocaine empire that lasted from the fall of 1991 to May of 93. Durk would even go as far as sourcing the cocaine and then cooking it into crack himself, which he would then bag for individual sale. He had a huge network of dealers who would help him push the product on the streets and even count the money for him. His top men, Robert Shipp, Mario Dunlop, and Alton Mills, would be arrested along with him and also receive life sentences for their participation in the drug trafficking ring. Their empire all came crashing down after a woman named Tasha Woods, who was involved in overseeing the street sales of the crack, agreed to testify against them in court. What made the snitching even worse was that Tasha was Mario's girlfriend and Big Durk's blood cousin. After learning about Big Durk's massive drug operation, they began following his top men. This eventually led them to get into a high-speed chase with Alton Mills, who allegedly threw half a kilo of coke out the window of his car. In addition to that, the police were able to intercept a phone call made by Big Durk on the day Mills was arrested, where he repeatedly asked if he had the candy. This phone call was enough for the feds to get a warrant to search a storage unit being rented by Big Durk in Lansing, Illinois, where they uncovered $1 million in cash and 10 kilos of cocaine. Durk and his associates were immediately arrested and were charged with 2 counts of knowingly and intentionally conspiring with others to possess cocaine with intent to distribute. At the time, the punishment for selling crack cocaine was way more severe than selling powder cocaine, so Big Durk was looking at a mandatory minimum of 30 years in prison. Authorities were able to learn even more about the scale of Big Durk's operation after two of his suppliers also snitched and testified at trial that they had delivered more than 85 kilos of cocaine to Big Durk between fall 1991 and May 1993. As a result, the two suppliers were handed sentences of 11 and a half years and 9 years, while Big Durk and his people were given life sentences. Lil Durk later suggested in interviews that the reason his father got such a harsh sentence is that they wanted him to flip on Larry Hoover, but he refused. Throughout his career, Lil Durk would praise his father for staying solid and not ratting his people out, even if it meant spending the rest of his life behind bars. So, Big Durk kept it solid and took the life sentence he was given at just 25 years old. Even the judge said that he felt bad about handing down such a harsh sentence for a nonviolent drug crime, but in the early 90s, the feds were going hard trying to shut down crack dealers, so the judge was forced to go along with the mandatory minimums set by the law. Even
Okay, I'm gonna stop there. So you get the picture about Big Durk. Even though now he's a Muslim, changed and he's doing stuff with the youth. But what I'm trying to show you is a system that is so rigged against these younger brothers because of their affiliation. All this information that I'm showing you is just out here. This is a reaction video to what's out there. So you got to think about how they paint these guys and how they still connect them to the sins of their fathers. You know what I mean? Now we're gonna look at Von's father. He's deceased, but we're gonna look at his character. What kind of father he had. Not blaming no fathers. They did the best they could, but it's a lot of factors going on with how they are addressing these young men.
Tomorrow is a long time coming. We're continuing the work we started over 20 years ago.
Case in this situation here.
This Thanksgiving,
Just for fair
we are
use,
thankful
it's
for you,
commentary
our valued customers, to show
from
our
Copyright
appreciation.
Act
We're serving up the
1976.
greatest
Check it out.
All I could think about was King Von. I found it very interesting covering it because they shared so much together, being father and son, that it's kind of crazy. I mean, that we always share our parents' traits, but at the same time, the similarities was very, very like just surprising and shocking. The type of person Silk was, and you seen it trickle down to King Von. So I hope y'all enjoy it. Without further ado, before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you aren't, and stay tuned with the content, man. Trust me, it's very lit here. I mean, we lit. All right, let's get straight into it. Now, Walter E. Bennett, aka Silk, also known as King Von's biological father. Now, he was born on October 28th, 1974, and was killed July 31st, 2005, when King Von was only 11 years old. Now, he was also a BD, a black disciple from Ada Park, which is located on the south side of Chicago. Everybody that was a resident over there and was around when he was considered Silk to be the most powerful and influential person of that area. Not to mention the richest person of that time in that area as well. Now, most people speculate that it was from drugs, not scamming, not robbing, not rapping, none of that. Silk was strictly a big time drug dealer where he was from, and that allegedly played a part in his death, but we'll get to that later. Now, his peers amongst those who happened to be on the outside looking in said that Silk was very, very big on respect and loyalty and was very stern about the people that he hung around. Not just anybody can hang around him, and he didn't just hang around anybody neither. Now, you know how they always say that the parents' traits trickle down to the child? I couldn't help while doing this realize how many things King Von and his father had in common, like I said earlier. They were very, very so much like a split image of each other. Now, Von's friends also expressed how big he is on loyalty, and we actually seen it when he made his first 100,000 off of rap music, and he went back to the hood and broke it down evenly in between his guys. It don't get no more loyal than that because he didn't have to do that, man. Like, it is very absurd. Like, it's not common that somebody make their first 100,000 and break it down between the guys. Usually they go buy their mother a house. They want to splurge. They want to buy cars. They actually want to stunt on the hood. But nah, not this man. He got his first 100,000 from rap, and he took it back to Chicago with his guys, and they split it amongst each other. Man, it don't get no realer than that. Now, also when it comes to friends who could be around Von, Tay Capone, who was once real close to Vaughn, he did an interview with 16 shot on visuals. Now he said, quote, everyone couldn't hang with Vaughn because you had to accept that you would be in a shootout. You would have to expect to shoot if you were around him, and if you wasn't that type of person, Vaughn would be able to sense that immediately. All right. Plus, we always seen King Vaughn with the same people around in his videos, interviews, his IG lives, performing, all of that. So, in a nutshell, you can see the similarities between King Vaughn and his father Silk. Not to mention, we all knew King Vaughn was a demon, and they say Silk was just as ruthless, if not more. Now, they say Silk was a demon. He seemed short in pictures, man. So a lot of people that knew him, that actually, instead of just from the outside looking in, the ones that knew him called him Little Silk. And I'm gonna tell you why I brought up his height, right? Because I got this thing with short people. I feel that a lot of people have the Napoleon complex. People that are short, and they may go 10 times as harder for situations because
I'm gonna tell you that a comment on that. They say short people have Napoleon complexes. I mean, it's really a compliment when you think about who Napoleon was. Like Napoleon, at the time he lived, he was the greatest general and conqueror in the world. I mean, they even put him in prison and locked him up. He got back out and took over again. So Napoleon was was a hell of a person. But they say because a guy may be short that he has a Napoleon complex. It's not really that. A shorter person, somebody's always willing to try them. You know what I mean? They do. It's a fact. You know what I mean? Growing up, if you smaller than everybody else, then you the one that's gonna get tried. So you get used to if you stand up in solid gap, you get used to accepting challenges. But then they say that's a Napoleon complex. How? When you challenging me, you trying me, you done size me up, and now that I'm reacting, I got a complex. You know, so that's another take on that.
they like small, like they short, and they feel like they got something to prove because people pick on them. Whereas it's something that you might walk away from, but they take it to the furthest extent because, like I said, they got something to prove. Like they might just shoot you for saying the wrong joke or something. I mean, that's really how it gets. I'm telling you, I've seen it not to the extent where somebody gets shot, but where a situation escalate and they really don't have to, but the person, felt like he was bothering him because he was smaller than him. It goes like that, man. But him being a demon, I think, judging from King Vaughn and seeing how King Vaughn carried himself and how he was described amongst his peers, I wouldn't.
I'm gonna tell you something else, and you may not believe this, or you might doubt it, or you might criticize what I'm finna say. When I was growing up, we had people we used to call mammy maid. That means that you was a boy that was strictly raised by your mother, and there was no man around, so we called you mammy maid. You know what I mean? Because everything that you was being taught and learning, you was basically learning from your mother or maybe your peers. And then the guys that had fathers, they were different because there was a different amount of discipline in the house with a father. It was things you just couldn't do, and you learned uh, how to communicate with other men because if your daddy come home and cuss you out and want to whoop your ass, and ain't nothing you could do about it, but learn how to stay out his way. You know what I mean? You don't throw no tantrum with your daddy. You throw that tantrum when your mama is there and ain't no men around. Then you throw a tantrum. And women can't make you men, and they can't make you strong. They can only make you more emotional and more volatile. You know what I mean? When it comes to your emotional state. That's why you see, like, it's a difference even with them guys from 63rd. You don't hear nothing about their daddies. Like nothing. All you see, you see Mama Duck, and you see the other ones, mamas, the ones that's at court, and even with they sons, out of all this gangster stuff they've been a part of, they actually cheering for somebody to go to jail when everybody signed up for the same type of situations. You know what I mean? So it's unfair to paint Oblock and Vaughn and them like monsters when they were born into these situations that was already there. You know what I mean? It's like they came into a world that was already uh assimilation. It was already, these things were already set in motion when they was born into it. You know, so this a different take on the story. You know what I mean? To humanize them, and you can see how why there's so much jealousy. You know what I mean? Like you may see they ops from 63rd, like King Yella and FBG Main, they they out there and they really cheering for the prosecution against guys that they lost a beef to. Now, you know, I'm out of Detroit, and we always had relationships with Chicago. Was next door. You know what I mean? You go to jail in Michigan or whatever, you're gonna be jailing with Chicagoans. You know what I mean? This is the Midwest, so we look at it and we pay attention to what's going on. Chicago was next door. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that we follow the trends of what's going on in Chicago because it directly affects certain street activities in Detroit. And older people, they so disconnected from the youth that they don't even pay attention. They don't even know what's going on with the youth because they're part of simulation. They go to work, come home, they're not really paying attention except what's being uh, promoted straight to them. They're not searching for information or learning about things. And this trial is important to watch because you get a chance to see how they bend in the laws. They're using artificial intelligence. Everything is coming out to try to get these boys locked up. They've been putting out rumors that uh, the guys from O Block is telling on each other. That's false. If they was telling on each other, their trials would be separated. You know what I mean? They wouldn't be going to trial together, sitting next to each other, and you would already know that. But if you ever been in trouble, they know that them telling on each other is not going to benefit anybody. You know what I mean? It's not going. You got to prove all of them guilty. You got to prove they all guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and they're not going to be able to do that if they don't tell on themselves. No matter what you say, if you wasn't there to see it, you cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these guys did that because they said the people that did it had on masks. You know what I mean? There's multiple people, multiple masks. You don't know multiple cars. So they trying to direct the narrative toward them because a lot of people have access to grind with these young men because of their fathers, because of how they was raised, and because of where they're from. You know what I mean? And this is out of Detroit. Just my commentary in reaction to some things that's out there. Peace out of Detroit. Keep your head on the swivel.